more than 20 Metropolitan Police officers broke down the front door of the UK's oldest Quaker meeting house on Thursday to arrest 6 young women who had met to discuss climate change and Gaza. The Metropolitan Police have been criticised recently for really heavy-handed policing of protests. They said that they were alerted to this group, they're called Youth Demand, who claimed that they would shut down London in the month of April. We're going to speak to one of those arrested protesters, excuse me, in the next few minutes. Firstly tonight, the Sunday Times' Katie Tarrant has this story.
On Thursday evening, 6 women were attending a welcome meeting led by a group called Youth Demand in a Quakers meeting house in Westminster. And this is sort of a place of worship for Quakers. There wasn't any worship going on at the time. But essentially, there was this activist meeting being held and there was a police raid on the building, which resulted in all of the 6 women attending being arrested. And the Quakers had called for the Met to issue an apology for making this raid, because they say this is not the type of space where you should have the police coming in, breaking the door down, breaking the window, and arresting a group of women who are essentially just sitting there talking.
OK, and so who are the group? This is Youth Demand, isn't it, that we're talking about here, that these women were a part of? Who are they exactly?
So Youth Demand are, as the name suggests, a youth group, and they have 2 main demands, really. One of them is to do with climate change, and it's for the UK to sort of step away from its reliance on fossil fuels. And the other one is to do with Israel and the war in Gaza, and the group's demand is for the UK to stop all trade with Israel. So they say that they are a non-violent action group, and they've been involved in a couple of incidents which listeners may have heard about last year, where the group protested outside of Keir Starmer's house and also sprayed red paint over the Ministry of Defence.
Yes, OK. So what have the police said for their part?
So the police have said that Youth Demand have been advertising on their social media for weeks that April is going to be the month that they shut down London. And by this, they mean that they want to stage roadblocks and just cause major disruption, really. So the police are saying, we knew this event was happening. We knew that this is their sort of stated intention. So we wanted to go in and basically preempt any planning, any action from happening next week that they consider to be unlawful. So these 6 women have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to cause a public nuisance.
Right, OK. And it strikes me, Katie, you know, we're clearly struggling here, aren't we, with where the line is between freedom of speech and demonstration and action and communication that does become malicious and actionable. Or more to the point, I guess, Katie, the sort of police perhaps are struggling with that line, are they?
Well, of course. I mean, there was a story in the Times today about 2 parents who were arrested after sending emails to their school about arrangements to do with their children. And, you know, it was only a few years ago that the police led a very heavy-handed response to protests following the death of Sarah Everard and protests at the King's coronation only a couple of years ago. So I think there is a real question here, which has been raised by the Quakers themselves, as to whether this was a bit of an overstep.
As the Sunday Times' Katie Tarrant. Well, Ella, who has agreed to speak to us on the understanding that we won't use her surname, was one of those who was arrested on Thursday. She also had her house and her bedroom searched, and she remains on bail this weekend. Ella, good evening.
Hiya, thank you for having me on.
Talk us through what happened on Thursday evening from your point of view.
So on Thursday evening, I was at a publicly advertised Youth Demand Welcome Talk. Now, this is a space where we hold where all members of the community can come together to discuss the situation that we are currently in with our government arming a genocide and funding a global genocide through climate breakdown. And we discussed what our responsibilities are at this time and what we can do about it. So about an hour into this, at 7:30, we hear this massive banging at the door, which it turns out was dozens of police literally smashing in a Quaker meeting house front door. They immediately swarmed into the room. We're talking about 6 young women sat in a circle drinking tea, talking about the current situation, and dozens of officers swarming in, telling us we were under arrest. We were told that we were under arrest for conspiracy to cause a public nuisance, and many of us were cuffed and dragged away into vans and all spent the night in custody.
Right. And so the Metropolitan Police then said Youth Demand, this is the organisation, stated an intention to shut down London over the month of April, where we absolutely recognise the importance of the right to protest. We have a responsibility to intervene to prevent activity that crosses the line from protest into serious disruption and other criminality. So, I mean, is it possible that stating an intention to shut down London, which I can see myself on the website now, is it not fair to say that that's possibly made police action of this kind inevitable?
Well, when you say inevitable, I think that's quite interesting because we really shouldn't be surprised that the police are acting like this, because why would a government that has no problem arming a genocide have a problem with arresting and raiding dozens of young people? And when we're talking about
the government, just on that point now, the government obviously aren't responsible for the day-to-day operation of the Metropolitan Police. This will be their decision to have done it. And I'm really thinking about their decision, whether inevitable or otherwise. Is it not right that the police pursue an organisation who claim that they're going to shut down London?
We are a group of ordinary people engaging in what is a proud British tradition of civil disobedience to get this change to happen. Like, we have actually been left with no other choice. When it comes down to it, when the interests of a government no longer reflects the interests of people, when the government is not acting in the best interest of their own people, those ordinary people have to get into the streets and they have to disrupt a business as usual that enables genocide. This is something that we have to do.
Right. They said that you were conspiring to cause a public nuisance. Were you?
I think it's really interesting that you're asking that, and you're not actually going to the root of public nuisance, which was introduced in 2022 in the Police, Crimes, Courts and Sentencing Act. Like, this was a piece of legislation that was brought in under a Tory government, specifically trying to crack down on what they referred to as protests, right? These are laws that have been called out by the United Nations as draconian policies, as the policies that are leading us into a police state. Like, I'm interested why you're asking this question and not questioning the policy itself. I mean, just look at a quote from Paul Parker, who released the testimony about the Quakers Meeting House, that no one has been arrested in a Quaker Meeting House in living memory. Like, what does this tell us about the times we are living in and the lengths that our government is willing to go to protect their interests, to protect the interests of their backers?
Okay. And just for what it's worth, we do, of course, scrutinise legislation like that and hold all power to account across the board, whoever they may be. I've got the website up here of Youth Demand. On there are pictures of spray-painted buildings. And there's an interesting segment where the organisation describe some of the action that they had taken in the past, and they point to painting to a Picasso painting that was covered in, I think it was paint at the time. And then it goes on to say that we're going to take the action to a whole new level. So some of that action there can probably be described as, or at least there is an accusation, that it is criminal damage. There is then the point made that will be taken to a whole new level. And I'm curious, I mean, again, is it not sort of fair to expect the police, when that kind of claim is made, to investigate?
Again, I find it really interesting that you want to focus here on the kind of actions that we're taking and maybe were the police justified, but you don't want to focus on the fact that our government is arming a genocide and the police are protecting their interests, right? As ordinary people at this time...
We talk about that a lot, but obviously the story that we're talking about now is the arrest. No, sorry, because you've accused... Hang on a minute, Ella, sorry. With all due respect, you have accused me of not focusing on those things, and I have to say that we do, of course we do, but what I'm talking about here, very specifically in this story, is your arrest and understanding how and why that happened. And, again, I simply put it to you that on the website it says, and you're well within your rights to disagree with the law, but it says here, or at least alludes to, the idea that the law may be broken.
We are living at a period in history where our government is consistently prioritising the interest of the rich over the interest of ordinary people, right? Our government's actions do not reflect the welfare of ordinary people in this country and around the world. So actually, yes, we live at a time where we do have to step outside of what I suppose they would refer to as the normal bounds. Let's look back at how changes have been made in history, right? Like, women didn't get the vote by voting. We cannot sit back and ask nicely. We have been doing that for years. We've been going out on on police facilitated marches for years, and nothing has changed. We're at a point where we actually have to take escalated action, and this looks like hundreds, thousands of young people getting out from across the country, getting onto the streets of London this April to shut it down, to shut down a business as usual that does enable genocide. And you can get involved with this. You can sign up at youthdemand.org. If you actually want to make a difference in this, you have to step outside the normal bounds and you have to shut it down. This is our responsibility at this time.
Where do you think, personally, the line is between protest and action that requires a police response?
Again, I'm really interested in why we're trying to talk protest politics. Like, the reality is that our government is arming a genocide. Our government is literally letting parts of F-35
You've made that point, and I understand it, and I've explained to you. I'm sorry, Ella. I do need to interrupt because you've made that point, and you're well within your rights too. But this is a story as it is at the moment. We cover the situation in Gaza a lot. We cover the rights and the wrongs of protest a lot. We cover the climate crisis a lot as well on this radio show. But this particular story is about where the line is between protest and police action. And that's the question I'm asking you. I'm asking you, where do you think that you are heavily involved this weekend in a story that involves that question? Right at the heart of it is that question. Where do you think? So I'm really curious to know where you think the line is.
I firmly believe that as young people engaging in this action to stop our government arming a genocide, I believe that we are upholding international law, right? Our government is violating international law by continuing to trade with and sell arms with Israel. So actually, I am just upholding international law, and that is the highest law there is.
And so where is the line? When does that cross the threshold?
We're at a point in history where we can no longer go through what our government has deemed the legal means to make this change. So yes, that does mean taking disruptive action. That means taking that uncomfortable action, getting out in the streets with Youth Demand this April and shutting it down.
So, but at what point does that become unacceptable?
I'm curious as to what the question is here. Is there something you want to ask me specifically about what's unacceptable?
Yeah, I'm asking you specifically. What do you think? I mean, where do you think the line is? What would you not do in the pursuit of your cause?
What we are talking about is young people stepping out onto the road and disrupting business as usual, doing it for a short period of time, right? That is what we are talking about at this time. Right. That is the action you can get involved with. That is what is effective. And I find it really interesting that, again, that we're sitting here and we're discussing protest politics. That's literally what this is. While our government is selling arms to Israel, while they are bombing hospitals, while they're bombing refugee camps,
it's a story about protest.
People are burning alive. Like, why are we not discussing that?
We discuss that at length. It almost is, actually. We discuss that at length on this show and on this radio station a lot. This is a story about protest. I appreciate your insights. It's been really, really interesting. Listen, I wish you well, of course. Ella, who is one of those protesters who was arrested on Thursday. You can read more about that in your copy of the Sunday Times this weekend. It makes the front page, that. And there are questions for the Metropolitan Police, aren't there, here, about whether or not that was a heavy-handed approach to policing an organisation or policing a group of people who presumably in that moment hadn't done anything wrong. I do think, I'm not sure Ella agrees, but I do think that where that line is a really, really fascinating issue of our times. It's something we're really grappling with. I'm not sure that we know, do we, between us, whether it's the protester or it's me whose job it is to ask all these difficult questions, or it's the Metropolitan Police whose job it is to police this, or maybe even the government whose job it is to write the legislation. I'm not sure that we do know, really, where we are comfortable drawing that line. Your take on that is very welcome because it's very personal and everybody has a take, don't they? 87222, times at the beginning of a message. You can get in touch on WhatsApp as well. 0333 003 2353.